Rob, can you tell us about your own current research and findings?
Yeah, I've just started a project funded by the Leverhulme Trust, which is, the title is Expressing Inner City Youth Identity Through Multicultural Urban British English. And I'm particularly interested in the language of young people and in cities like Manchester. And there's been a lot of work in London and a lot of people talking about it, particularly after the riots, when language seemed to come to the fore, and when they were looking at these young people who were involved, and certain people were on kind of mainstream media talking about the way these young people were speaking, and they seemed to think it was some kind of put on slang. They call it ghetto slang and ghetto grammar and all these things. And so the people doing the projects in London were looking at this, and they came up with this term multicultural London English, which is a new emerging variety of English in London, which has influences from traditional Cockney, but also from all the other languages that are now part of London. And they're explaining that this is quite inevitable change in the way that young people are going to speak. So I was interested in if that was happening in Manchester, but I think it's more than that. I think to identify it as a particular variety is making it too narrow in a sense. I think there's more going on. We've spoken about how everybody uses language in the performance of their identities. I think the same thing is happening in Manchester, and young people are particularly interesting to look at because they're at a time of their lives when they're finding their way in the world, and they are literally constructing their own identity as they go, and this changes a lot, and a lot of this is the way they speak, and of course their speech will be influenced by who's around them. So we've mentioned that a young person's language from the age of 7 is the biggest influence of their peers. Well, if they're growing up in an environment where they are exposed to lots of different languages, and some of the young people I work with live in areas where there's just a huge variety of languages and cultures, that's the influence they're going to have. So when they're out playing on the street, as they will be, they'll be exposed to all these different things. And there's a big Jamaican kind of West Indian culture. There's a big African culture, and all these things come together to create this new kind of way of speaking. But it's not as if it is just a cut and dried different variety. People will use different features in order to portray the identity they want to portray. So there might be some particular words some of the people use, or particular ways of pronouncing things, and all this is all mixed together. And it's not that this is an accent that's different from another accent. I think it's happening in all different urban centres around the country, because they're from the cultural mix is very similar, but what's emerging is quite an interesting new way of speaking. Having said that, there's nothing new about teenagers speaking differently to the generations that go before them. I think what's caught people's imagination this time, and why, if you look in the mainstream media, often people do talk quite negatively about the way young people are speaking. I think it might have something to do with, because it does have these influences from other cultures which weren't around, which didn't influence the language so much in 20, 30, 40 years ago. And so in the past I think it was quite easy to identify from the way somebody spoke where they were from, where the heritage language that we were talking about. Now it's not so easy.